ahead and get started, and as I give my intro, people will join throughout. So hello everyone, and welcome to Leadership Perspectives Through COVID, presented by the Institute for Public Relations and Peppercom. My name is Tina McCorkindale. I'm the president and CEO of the Institute for PR. We are a nonprofit foundation, and we're dedicated to greater use of research in the profession. So on July 14th, IPR and Peppercom, we released our third study about COVID. IPR has done some other studies about COVID, but this is our third co-partnered study. And that was with Steve Cody, who is the founder and CEO of Peppercom. Wave hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Also, Steve is also the IPR chair, and he's going to moderate today's panel conversation. So the ebook features 30 profiles and interviews with communication executives from corporations, agencies, nonprofits, and universities. So topics that we be highlighted today focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially following the George Floyd protest, and return to work, internal communication, all those different areas, future of business and corporate purpose. And today we're joined by three of the amazing ebook contributors from the report that I'll introduce now. So the first one is Moira Knight. She's an IPR trustee and the vice president of corporate communications at Astellas US, and also president of the Astellas Foundation. She's responsible for developing and leading communications initiatives and reputation management to achieve Astellas' strategic business goals in the US. Then we have Jennifer Witter, who is the co-founder and CEO, CEO and founder of the Borland Group, a PR agency that focuses on women-led and minority-owned companies as well as nonprofits. She is a passionate advocate for women in the workplace. She's an in-demand speaker signed by the NSL Experience, and she leads discussions at such top-tier organizations as the Pentagon, Columbia University, Brown Brothers Harriman, and TEDx. Jill Carapolati is also an IPR trustee, and she's the group vice president of corporate communications for Macy's. She has over 2 decades of global strategic communications experience with specialization in corporate communications, internal communications, change and crisis management, executive coaching, and corporate branding. So thanks to the three of you for contributing to the ebook and for being here today. So before I turn it over to Steve, for our attendees, if you have any questions, you can go to the bottom and put it in the chat function. That's usually a little easier to use in the Q&A. We will also do that as well. You can also use the hashtag IPR webinar on Twitter, and we are going to have time for Q&A. The playback will be made available today. So Steve is going to moderate, and then I'm going to handle the Q&A. So without further ado.
To our distinguished panelists for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. And I know we're going to get some real insights and gems from the three of you. So since it's Throwback Thursday, I thought I would start off with a throwback question. So let's go back, from today to March 12th. And looking at everything that's transpired from COVID to George Floyd to DE&I, anything and everything under the sun, in terms of you personally and your function, your organization, what are you most proud of in terms of what you've accomplished? And is there something you would have done differently had you had the chance to do it over? So can we start, Jill, with you, since alphabetically C would come first?
Sounds like a good plan, Steve. Thanks so much. And thank you and Tina for having me on today's panel. I did want to take a moment to thank IPR overall. Throughout this period, the information and research and seminars have been so helpful to me and to my team. So thank you for continuing that during these challenging times. And speaking of my team, a quick shout out to the Macy's Inc. corporate communications colleagues. Nothing I talk about today would have been possible without their efforts. So I did just need to say hi to our friends there. So to your question, Steve, how has COVID-19 changed our communications function? What are we proud of? What could we have done differently? If we think about how it's changed the function, if we look at the simple definition of corporate communications, it's about informing and inspiring our stakeholders to help them move forward in business or change information. But if you look at that simple definition and you raise the stakes and intensity by 1,000 notches, that's what we're dealing with right now. So that's going to change an individual. That is going to change a function. But we're really proud of the work the team has been able to do, and particularly because we're not just communicating the message, we're actually creating the story. And what I mean by that is the corporate communications team is at the table with policy decisions on how we're going to handle temperature checks with our colleagues. How are we going to create signage in our stores to make sure our customers feel safe? You know, we're not just creating the messages, we're helping to decide what that looks like. Really proud of that work. I mean, if you think about for Macy's, we closed nearly 600 of our stores. We reopened those stores. We had majority of colleagues on furlough. We had to bring the colleagues back. We looked at curbside pickup to change the way we were creating a customer experience. None of that would have been possible without communications. And you know, if we reflect, again, I've done a lot of soul searching on this work over the past few months, and we actually had an opportunity inside the company to do an after action review. And for anyone listening, I would highly encourage that you do that. And it's a session now where you can take a step back, ask yourself some simple questions while it's still somewhat fresh in terms of the journey that we've been on. And we had, from a communications perspective, 3 key themes that emerged. Some of them tactical, some of them more management. I'll share that with you. So first of all, from a tactical perspective, create templates really early and often. We were reinventing the wheel throughout the COVID-19 process. So if we had a confirmed case or something happening where we needed to update our organization, we had the same group updating that same information. So we have now created templates that are all approved and everyone feels good about in terms of the information, but those could be tweaked quickly. It sounds like such a simple best practice, but from a comms perspective, it has really made a huge difference. Secondly, I think the thing that we could have done differently and we continue to look at is the way we engaged our furloughed colleagues. So if you look up the makeup of the organization, we had close to 100,000 colleagues on furlough, difficult situation. So, you know, the traditional measures of proactive communication where colleagues were not being compensated, that becomes a bit challenging. But we stopped and we listened to our colleagues. They wanted to hear from us. They wanted to stay connected, especially during this moment in time in the business. So we created tactics like microsites and text messaging and so forth to stay connected with that organization and that group of colleagues. And that was really important for us. And what I would say in the third theme for us was do not underestimate the benefit of downtime and well-being for your teams. You know, in corporate communications, this is the life we've chosen, right? So we are 24/7. Simple things like taking a step back, having someone shadow a project, not having the same group on calls on all the different hours of the day. So again, normal things you would do, but nothing about this is normal. So upon reflection, those were things and important themes for us, but we need to continue to listen. And so as we've gone through this journey, if we don't listen to our stakeholders, our colleagues, our customers, which we do on a regular basis, Steve, we look at the sentiment from our customers. They really appreciate the steps we've taken for safety in our stores. We have a culture pulse survey, which is basically an engagement study we launched this week. We added specific questions about everything that's happening in our environment right now to gauge where our colleagues are and where they're going moving forward.
Thank you so much, Jill. I mean, you hit on the emotional and mental impact this is having on each and every one of us. It's just so critical. So thank you for sharing that. Moira?
Hi, everybody. My name's Moira Knight, and I head up communications at Astellas. And for those of you who don't know us, Astellas is a pharmaceutical company just outside of Chicago in Northbrook, Illinois. And we specialize in cancer therapies, immunology, transplant medicines, urology, as well as cardiology. And we are an organization that's headquartered. Our U.S. headquarters in the U.S. are in Northbrook, but our company is a global company, and it's headquartered in Tokyo, Japan. I would say that one of the things that the communications team, and to your point earlier, it is the team that puts all of this together. It has been what I call kind of a strategic enabler for the company. Early on, we saw in the Asian part of our company things beginning to shut down and to change. So that actually gave us in the US a bit of a runway was happening in Asia as it moved into Europe and then into the United States. And each region of our company had to operate in a different way. And so communications became the kind of organization that could peer around the corner and see what is happening next and start to be prepared. Very early on, meetings where you had bad decision A or bad decision B, things like we're going to have to cancel an event that is for thousands of people. We are going to have to take our sales field representatives out of the field who are calling on healthcare professionals. And Astellas was very early in the kind of timeline for COVID to instill some of these practices. Those decisions were business decisions that were led by communications and our events team and our CSR team, really helping to direct our business and help them realize that there were severe implications for our employees, for our customers, and importantly, for patients. As you can imagine, with the product list that serves people with cancer, we take that very, very seriously. And so we very quickly moved into making our business a virtual one. The thing I am most proud of as we've gone into this unusual time is just how supportive the communications team and how proactive the communications team has been in rising to the occasion. We created a town hall that is essentially a live stream video. It's highly produced, and it's also an interactive tool because so many of our employees are around the world and working remotely. We felt that this was a really great way to engage people. We were able to celebrate wins. We were able to give back to the community. We were able to communicate important milestones for the company. And it was the communications team that helped really bring all of these components together. It was a huge learning. We're still learning from it. We have a long way to go. And fortunately, we are not in the situation where we have had to furlough employees or had to make some of those incredibly tough decisions that you have. But we have paid a very, very close eye to what's happening in the hospital environment, as you can imagine. It is just a very strange time for our business, but also for the people that we serve, and that takes a very compassionate ear. One of the most difficult things, I think, for us has been the demands on technology and the need for technology to be flawless all the time, especially in communications. We've had some really great, beautifully produced pieces, and then the tech fails. And so the execution becomes a real difficult situation, as you can imagine. And how you professionally rise above that and move on and realize that you are making a great difference. Even if the tech fails, you have backups and redundancies, and you'll get there. It's giving people the grace to realize that we are in a very unusual time, and not everything is going to go perfectly. But if we can make small steps, incremental steps to helping people understand the severity of the situation as it relates to our business, we're in a good place. So it's been a great opportunity, I think, to pull in all the learnings that you have from crises, from issues that come up, and put them all on the table for the use of employees and the business at large.
Great. Thanks so much, Moira. Jennifer, you obviously wear multiple hats. There's the Borland Group, but you're also responsible for the care and nurturing of your clients. So could you address both?
Oh, absolutely. And, again, Steve and Kimberly, thank you for having me here. But what I want to say is that one of the things that I'm most proud of was our ability to pivot for our clients, because at the beginning of the year, we had our plans. Obviously, there was flexibility built into it, and we were moving forward. And then everything just hit suddenly. I mean, you can create a crisis communication plan from here to Sunday, but this kind of event that we're now living in is unprecedented. And what we were doing with our clients, and what I always say is that we are not a vendor to our clients, we are their partners. And because we are a boutique agency, we're able to have a closer than usual relationship with each of our clients because we're purposely small. So we were there for them on multiple levels. What were the programs that they were working on? What were the strategies that were being enacted that had to be adapted? And that's what we did. We provided them with that advice. We provided them with a roadmap. But we were also there when they were feeling stressed. And I can't undervalue how much all the CEOs were feeling at that time when the pandemic first hit, because many of them lost money, they lost clients, everything. And actually one client had called me and he was crying. And what I had to do was to walk him through that, because he felt he was of no value to his staff during this difficult time. So in addition to helping them with the work and pivoting and looking for alternatives that would keep the revenue still coming in, we had to act as almost like a counselor to them and saying that it was okay. We were going to move forward and reinforcing the relationship. We are tiny but mighty, my staff. That's what we say. And to me, you cannot work unless you have a staff. And I wanted to make sure that the staff was okay. So I called them individually and to have conversations and make sure that they were okay. Because again, they are important to the organization, and the work that they do obviously helps our client. And in terms of quickly with the speaking engagements that I do, one, they're on implicit bias. And I've been acting almost as a coach to my clients, because nobody was really thinking about this the way they're thinking about it now, with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd. And it was like the scales fell from their eyes. And they were asking me guidance in terms of their communication. How should they write? How should they speak? And I am pleased beyond to be able to provide them with that guidance, and that they asked for it. And when there was this one client who did a press release on their own, and they asked me to take a look at it. And obviously they'll remain unnamed, but there was a line in it that would have caught fire if it had gone out. So I am really proud of the fact that we, the Borland Group, are able to offer this component that will enable them to communicate externally and internally with as few missteps as possible. So I would say those three areas: being there for the client, being able to pivot, to offer suggestions for programming that in many cases they were able to enact and continue to move forward, being there for the staff, who are the linchpin of any organization, and finally being able to share the knowledge that I've gleaned over the years as being a woman of color with the work that I have done in the implicit bias and conscious bias space that now is critical to their moving forward and understanding, because we're in such a sensitive time right now that you can see that one misstep, even if it's unintentional, can have long-term ramifications.
Great, thanks. Now I know who to call when I'm about to cry, so thank you.
I'm always here.
I wanted to pivot to the second question, and it really relates back to the second of the three co-branded surveys that we did, and it was fielded on or around June 1st, and one of the more unfortunate findings was that more than 50% of the CCOs, senior communicators, were not paying any particular attention to employee resource groups, minority groups, people of color, different sexual identities, et cetera. And their rationale was, look, we've got to keep the lights on, and we're just treating the employee population as a whole. So I wanted to hear what your take was, what your take is on that, and how, obviously things have changed dramatically in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we're seeing just an amazing outpouring on both the agency side and on the corporate side. So did you see any of that in your worlds in terms of, hey, we have to keep the lights on, and now is not the time to focus on minorities and people of color, even though they were the hardest hit by COVID? Does that come as any surprise? I guess I'll start, if you don't mind, we'll keep doing it alphabetically just so I can keep my own head wrapped around.
Absolutely not, Steve, thank you. And what I would say on behalf of Macy's, we embed D&I into how we think, act, and operate. It's inherent in who we are. So the pandemic did not change our commitment, but there were certainly specific steps we've taken during this time so that our customers and our colleagues feel like they're part of an inclusive community, and that was so important. So some of the things we looked at were, our chairman and CEO, Jeff Gannett, addressing our customers and making sure that they understand our point of view. So we had an open email to our customers sharing our thoughts and making sure that we could share that on social media as well. We committed $1 million to our social justice partners, including National Urban League and National Action Network. So really important, again, having that point of view and that connection. And for internal colleagues, we've done a number of things, and we continue. As I said, it's in how we think and act and operate. One example I'll share, we hosted a session with Dr. John Fitzgerald Gates, who's the Vice Provost of Diversity and Inclusion at Purdue. And he's a longtime friend of Macy's and a great partner of ours. And we had a session we called Can We Talk? And this is where we brought together our colleagues who are both active and furloughed. Really important for us to do this, to have a conversation, to be heard, to learn, to listen. And this is a moment Dr. Gates facilitated some learnings, but we also had our colleagues share their information, their stories, and their perspectives, which was just so important. And we were really proud of that, and we continue to have listening sessions where we can glean insights and information. So that's what we're going to continue to do, despite what's happening. We can't control what's going on outside of the stores in our facilities, but we can certainly shape our culture. And that's what we're going to look to do. And, we, in this moment, in these times, we turn to our values, acceptance, integrity, respect, giving back. That guides our decision making. So no matter where we're going and where we're turning, we need to make sure that we have the right information and that our colleagues and customers feel part of this inclusive community. So Steve, what I would say, and I could go on and on truly, but what I would say at this moment is so important to make sure that we lean on our values.
Understood, and listening, as you said, is absolutely fundamental to the entire process. Moira?
Yeah, so diversity and inclusion was critically important to Astellas prior to the pandemic, and it took no less of importance during the initial outbreak all the way through to today. I will start off by saying early on in the COVID-19 pandemic, we brought together our Asian employee impact group, and we have 7 employee impact groups, to have a very open discussion across the company about biases that were being placed on Asians in general in America because of the kind of alleged source of COVID-19. That was a huge topic for us. After the George Floyd's racial injustice outcry began to gain more and more momentum, like Jill, we hosted a forum, an open forum with all of our employees in the US to openly talk about individual experiences as African Americans, as well as talk to how we as an organization can support each other and build one another up. Both of these forums were critical in helping us understand one another and also truly seek to make meaning of a very difficult time. In addition, we have launched what we're calling a 3-year people strategy to help us attract, develop, retain employees across the board with a heavy emphasis on diversity and inclusion. The pharmaceutical industry, the industry of biotechnology, has a long way to go in this regard. And we feel at Astellas that we need to do everything we can. We were working toward it prior to this year, and I would say we are accelerating that now. Just like Jill said, our culture and our values are very strong at Astellas. In fact, about 93% of our employees are positively engaged with those values. And a lot of that has to do because of the nature of our business, right? We are creating therapies for people who are very, very ill. And that brings with it a certain kind of mentality and compassion as well. Openness has been a core component of our culture for many, many years now. And so when we see activities that are inconsistent with that core value, we can no longer support them. It has brought about amazing conversations in the company, and I think is going to help propel our culture forward and our business.
Awesome, thank you. Jennifer, you were kind enough to elaborate in great depth on this particular question in our report. Do you mind sharing your views?
Okay. In terms of, what I was saying about the PR industry and giving the talk to it, I've been in PR now since 1982, and the Borland Group is 17 years old. And I can tell you, I've been in the agency world since 1989. And I can tell you that virtually at every agency that I belonged to or worked for, they would say to me, Jennifer, we need to find more of you, like I was a 3-headed unicorn. And obviously they were referring to the fact that I am a Black person, a woman of color. And at most of the agencies where I worked at, I was the only person of color in a senior level position. And, the pressure was there always the time to feel like I was representing, that I couldn't take a step out of line, because if I did, that it would impugn the thought processes around people of color. For many people who worked for me, it was the first time they worked for a person of color. And so there was a lot going on in the public relations industry. And even though they would say to me, we need to find more of you, which again, they did not realize it, but it wasn't the best thing to say to a person because it really wasn't thought of back then. Nothing was ever really done. Nobody ever walked the talk. Nobody ever did anything. And, with this new attention to implicit bias and equality and diversity and inclusion, I take kind of a side eye to it because I've been hearing this for over 30 years. And let's be blunt, the public relations industry is not diverse. It is not. And you can say you are diverse, but who are in your senior leadership positions? Do they represent the country? Here in New York, the former mayor, David Jenkins, said, the glorious mosaic that is New York City. Is your PR company the glorious mosaic of where it is? And I can say that, with definite feelings, is that it is not. You have to have inclusion. And where PR agencies are saying we want to be diverse. A person who I know who's in the DEI space said, and she defined it this way: diversity is when you're being asked to the party, and inclusion is that you're being asked to dance. So you can have, people of color, Blacks, Asians, Hispanic in your company, but if they don't feel welcome, if they don't feel valued, and I'm not saying to the exclusion of others, but if they don't feel that they are participating, if they don't feel that they have the opportunities to move ahead, if you are not listening to that person, because I'm speaking from experience where I said what I said. There was one agency where I worked, and I saw all these people pole vaulting past me, and all of them happened to be white. And I had to fight to become a vice president. And I actually had to go to my boss and said, if I don't become a vice president, I have to leave this organization. And one of the young women that I mentor was in a similar position as well at another PR agency, and she's a woman of color. So until we get to a time where we recognize public relations, that we have to be diverse, we have to be welcoming, we have to make people feel that they are part of it, where we are now is not going to change. So right now, I look at the PR industry, and believe me, I wouldn't be in it for 30 plus years if I did not enjoy what I do. But I am tired of hearing, where can we find more of you? We're not unicorns, we're out there.
Understood. Jill, you talked about purpose and how important purpose is at your organization. How has purpose helped you communicate internally to all your stakeholder audiences in terms of messaging, tonality, et cetera? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, Stephen. If we think about purpose, I'll think about it from a corporate purpose perspective, right? And one of the ways I'd say that manifests for us at Macy's is by giving back. It's one example, but I've been in the organization 3.5 years, and I have been so impressed with the passion around giving back in our communities from both a colleague and customer perspective. And so now if you think about the juxtaposition of where we are as a society, giving back means so much. But the way we have to look at it at Macy's is a little different. So it's in our DNA, but the execution of that's changed, and I'll give you a few examples of that. So every March we have a campaign we call Bag Hunger, which supports food and local food banks to make sure that across the country we're managing that and help to support. But of course, March 17th came and we had to close all of our stores. So you've got this great program going, you've got colleagues and customers engaged. So what do you do then to pivot? How do you maintain that corporate purpose and that sentiment? So we made a decision to partner with Meals on Wheels, the COVID-19 response fund. And that was a partnership for us to help our customers, put in their baskets donations when they're at point of sale or online, et cetera. But that was something we decided to do during this time frame. And so proud to say that we raised $1.4 million for our seniors and for the vulnerable populations. So it wasn't that we had to change the way we look at giving. It was what's happening at this moment in time. Food security was certainly a concern. And how do we pivot and make sure that we can continue our corporate purpose moving forward? So that was really important to us, Steve. And I would say that does not end. This week, we just kicked off what we call the Big Give Back at Macy's. And that's an opportunity for our colleagues through volunteer hours, as well as through donations, to support this sentiment and our purpose. And so we're really excited because just in the 2 short weeks of starting the program, we're exceeding our goals. But what I really love, what I'm inspired about in terms of our purpose, is that our colleagues are finding new ways to volunteer. So using virtual, and Moira, I feel you on the technology, because certainly that becomes a challenge, but looking at ways to, instead of going to a food bank or instead of going to a senior center, making face coverings and shipping them to places that need it, writing out cards for seniors and mailing them. There are countless examples of this. So, I think if we look at our purpose and again, back to the values, we have to pivot at this moment in time to make sure that we can do things differently, meet people where they are, but we're not going to lose sight of who we are as an organization. And that corporate purpose is so important.
It's a great point, and obviously I won't name them, but there are some companies that have been called out by their employees for not living up to their purpose during this time. Moira, do you want to just address that? Not that particular issue, but how you've been using your purpose to help guide your communications through this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm honored because I have, as part of my role, a community role. I oversee our Global Health Foundation, and I also am responsible for volunteerism and corporate philanthropy in the United States. So when everything began to change for our company around COVID, we had a responsibility to look at all of these components: the philanthropy, the volunteerism, the community engagement. We're very fortunate in that our employees are very active in the community. They are seeking things to do. They come to our team frequently and with suggestions, or also asking for ideas. And so we've done a variety of things. First off, the Global Health Foundation works on access to medicines in places where Astellas does not have a geographic or physical presence. And so early on, we realized, COVID is going to hit sub-Saharan Africa in a very detrimental way. It's going to hit India, and in a way that we might not even be able to fathom in the United States. So we changed the course of our funding to support global organizations that are addressing COVID in these countries. And we have committed about $2 million to that effort. Additionally, we have in the United States supported, especially in the state of Illinois, the state, the governor here has set up a variety of funds to help both the city of Chicago as well as the state at large, and we've worked to support that, again, focusing on access to healthcare. Additionally, we have provided for our employees multiple what we're calling virtual volunteerism opportunities. We've also seen from our employees things that they are doing, donating blood or providing kits to veterans. And so we're asking our employees to share those stories. We call that random acts of kindness. We have a annual volunteerism tradition called Changing Tomorrow Day. And what we've done this year, we normally go out into the community and provide in-kind services, everything from refurbishing to painting to helping with education. And this year we are going to be doing kits that can be filled at home for veterans and for healthcare workers. So similar to what Jill has mentioned. It's been a huge effort on top of the communications work to make sure that we are giving back to the community in a really meaningful way. After we saw the racial injustice travesties that have been happening around the country, we also directed funding and support and volunteerism to solidarity efforts, and have provided some initial grants as well as a variety of volunteerism opportunities as well. So groups like the Urban League, like you mentioned, Jill, we are involved too, and we praise them for the work that they are doing. So it's been a time of great need, and we're just pleased to be able to help in some small way. I feel like we, as in business overall, with the Business Roundtable recently talking about purpose being part of how a company should be running itself, and purpose being meaningful to investors, Now we have an opportunity to really show and demonstrate how these initiatives that maybe some of us have been doing for years and years really do impact the bottom line and employees.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, a completely different question for you.
Yeah.
So as we've all been through media training, we've given media training, you know, one of the tenets of media training is if you don't want to see it, read it, or hear it, don't say it. With Goodyear and what's happening with Goodyear, is that an example of a plant manager just not being properly managed, or not being conscious of the fact that anything that you can say or write can and will find its way to the, you know, the greater world, and what lessons are to be learned?
Okay, well, first and foremost, I want to, say with Goodyear, this is not going to be a political statement. I'm looking at it from the 360 viewpoint. And this is what I say to all of my clients, and I have written on crisis communications and business planning, is that you have to understand that with communications, you have to test it out internally and see if there's a strength in it, if there are weaknesses in it, and address it. And when you put it out to your staff, there is no guarantee that it's not going to be leaked. And you should expect it to be leaked, even if you tell people it's going to be internal. So with the Goodyear situation with other companies, we've seen so many companies trip over their feet during this time. And I do feel that they have not taken the time, energy, and effort with their resources to put together a plan that, there's always a wrinkle. There's always going to be something where you're going to have an issue with. But this is Goodyear. These are major Fortune 500 companies. They should have the common sense to know that if they're going to go out there, their message has to be rifle focused. Because if you keep going out with a changing message, with a changing position, the only thing that you're doing is confusing those who are your audience or making it worse for yourself. So when you put together a crisis communication plan where you have external communication, obviously you have that within the plan, you have to make sure that if this happens, what is plan B? If this happens, who is going to react? If this happens, how do we as a company recover? And then in PR, as we all know it, let's pivot away from it. Let's not keep feeding the beast by continuing to feed into, oh, we meant this. This is what we said. Say what you have to say, and then pivot to what you are doing that is to the benefit of the company, the employees, your customers, and to the business. But don't, act like you're living in a vacuum, because you have the resources there. You just have to use them properly.
Great advice. Completely different question for you, Jill. One of the really cool aspects of speaking to so many CCOs like you and Moira is your belief, and it's certainly being played out across corporate America, that the CCO role has never been more important than post March 12th, in my opinion, and from what I've heard from various CCOs. Is this going to stay, or is it going to dissipate and go back to where the CCO used to sit? Or is the CCO now, as a result of this new abnormal, as I'm now hearing it being called, has the CCO risen to a new level within the C-suite as a result of what's going on?
I think, Steve, at this moment, and what I would say, I head up internal communications in the company, and Cheryl Heinen, who is one of the best in the business, is our chief communications officer. And I think she would agree with me that at this moment in time, we are used to having processes and procedures to help guide what we're doing. Right now, we're writing the playbook as we go along. And that's just not for communications. That's for the business overall. So as I said at the top of my remarks, I think as a corporate communications team member, whether you're just starting out or doing this 20 plus years, like all of us here on the panel, you are really creating what the corporate communications world is going to look like moving forward. And so part of that is being at the table, helping to make decisions. Like you said, Steve, is that going to change? I think that's happening for us, particularly at Macy's. We are very much at the table, driving and helping to drive the business, but being there to help guide what this playbook is going to be moving forward is so powerful for corporate communications. And I tell my team all the time, having gone through this, and whether you've worked in crisis communications or not, this is definitely nothing we've ever experienced in our lifetime. And I think corporate communications is going to be better for it. Improved speed of decision making, being agile, and helping to coach. I think another important piece in a role we're playing is helping our leadership throughout the organization navigate this moment in time. How do you speak to your teams? How do you create a dialogue that has empathy and compassion, not just about the business, but about what colleagues or customers are feeling? Corporate communications at the center point of this, and I don't see that changing. I see that only continuing as we move forward.
Awesome. Moira, same question.
Yeah, I love that, Jill. I think, I am not a CCO. I oversee communications in the U.S. I have a job that has a lot of different responsibilities for sure. But what I believe about the CCO position is that you earn that seat at the table by coming to management with bold thinking and helping them through the tough decisions when they feel like they want to cry because they've got to make some really hard choices, and you stay the course with them and help them through that. That does earn you that right to be able to say, I think we need this, or I think we should approach it that way, or maybe I have a dissenting opinion and let's talk together. The way my president in the US has talked about it is that communications has played a strategic role in shaping how we respond in times of great urgency and great need, no matter what's the issue. And ensuring that we do that in a way that whether it's internal, external, is consistent across the board, and really importantly for our business, compliant. So the opportunity, I think, for CCOs is definitely there. We will continue, though, to have ups and downs and peaks and valleys, in my opinion, on the importance and the relevance of strategic communications. By and large, though, I do feel that CEOs of this kind of time period really do value that. And they talk about the chief communications officer as a partner to them as they have to navigate tough waters really every single day. And to me, that's a huge opportunity, because you go from chief communications officer to kind of chief compassion officer, and repeating that message over and over again. It's always been my belief that if you have a really thorny issue, that's where the opportunity lies to show your smarts, to pull in research, to work with your colleagues, to collaborate, and not to run away from the issue or feel threatened by it, but to really go into it and say, okay, how can my skill set help build that? And that builds trust, and that builds responsibility down the road.
Sure, that's a great point. And Jennifer, you already told us you're a life coach and a chief compassion officer for your own clients. Do you see the role of the agency executive changing, morphing more towards your model?
Yes.
Not that I'm qualified to have anyone cry on my shoulder.
I think you are already, but yes, absolutely. These are unusual times, and I think that what has happened is that we have stripped back some of the so-called behaviors of professionalism. I'm not saying that in a negative way, but where you're allowed to be more vulnerable, where you're allowed to speak your fears. Because I believe it was Jill who was saying it earlier about self-care. We can't keep it bottled in because we will get sick. And as the CEO of my own company, I was there for my staff. As the chief consultant to my clients, I was there for my clients. Who was there for me? And I had to make sure that I had an outlet as well. But getting back to the original question, whereas is the CEO role changing where it becomes more intimate professionally? Yes, because in this time, which is again so sensitive. I mean, just think about it. Within 6 months, we had COVID, we had the Black Lives Matter movement. We are having some upcoming times where it's going to be very turbulent. You know, even Michelle Obama has said that she has low-grade depression. Is that we are going to have to lean on each other. That 6 months ago, we never would have thought we would be doing that. So I feel that, and as I said before, I don't see myself as a vendor. I see myself as a partner to my clients. And if that means that I have to be there in a moment that doesn't fit the previous parameter, I will be there, because again, we need to walk forward together, because the mental stress on all of us will crack the strongest person. And we just don't have that opportunity anymore.
Agreed. Jill, you spoke, obviously you run internal communications. We've seen internal communications and employee engagement just become paramount to the health and well-being and productivity of an organization. Do you see more resources, whether those are people or budgets, et cetera, in the future being given towards internal communications and employee engagement, and maybe less so to special events and other things? I mean, is this a new era for internal communications and employee engagement?
Well, I think it's a new opportunity. And, you know, I might be slightly biased because I've built a career on internal communications, so I'm very passionate about it. But never in my career have I seen it come to life in a way that is so important to an organization and to our colleagues. So I certainly hope, if organizations are not thinking of it that way, that they take the lens of what we've been through and readjust their thinking and their resources. You know, I would say for Macy's, we had the benefit of building, 3.5 years ago, a team, a set of infrastructure, tools, materials that really served us well during this crisis and continues to serve us well. But it's about looking at what we can learn as we move forward. And so some of the things, simple but really powerful, just having regular weekly updates, all of our colleagues hearing from our CEO, what's happening in the business, what is his personal perspective, and how can we relate that personal perspective to our colleagues? You know, making sure that we have those moments where our colleagues can feel connected. Looking at the tone of voice, it's not about just putting an external memo up to say we have a new process. Let's speak with that compassion. Let's change the tone. That's where I think internal communications can really help an organization. And then I think as we think about, the virtual world, virtual work, internal comms comes into play in so many ways. But how do we capture those moments, like those impromptu conversations that are happening, used to happen in the elevator? Now, how do we create that moment through these virtual tools that we have? So I think there is a huge opportunity for those in internal communications, as well as I'd say around the spectrum of corporate. Our team has had the opportunity, whether you're in media relations or internal or in the giving side of our group, to work as a cross-functional team, to learn, to grow in this space. And I can't imagine a better place to grow than during a crisis. And so I think internal communications is going to be more important than ever, Steve.
Yeah, when you talk about budgets for internal communications, I don't know that we'll see more going to that, because I see what we're doing here right now on Zoom as a really cost-effective way to be able to communicate to broad audiences. And what's happening right now is that we're changing the norms. We're changing the way that we work and how we communicate with one another. This, in the last 6 months, has become more normalized than it ever was before. The amount of times that we've all had to get on a plane for a meeting in another place that was maybe a half a day, 2 hours, whatever, I think that's going away, quite honestly. And so I don't know that we'll see more budgets changes coming to internal communications. I think it's valued more, I do, but I think you're going to see more pressure to do it as well using technology that could maybe drive down the costs.
Makes perfect sense. Jennifer, I know you handle internal, external, crisis, everything. Your thoughts?
I think that, one of the things is that with internal communications is that, as Moira was saying, the way, like working from home, since I started the Borland Group, we have been a virtual organization. And, there were people, that I would say, I work from a home office, like, ugh, I would get that look like we were, not the professional company that we are. And that whole mindset has changed radically. And so many people have been coming and saying, how do you hold together a virtual team? How do you have that camaraderie? And so I think that with communications in the world that we are in, and we probably won't be in offices the way we were for quite some time, that we're going to need to look at not just what the person is doing professionally, but what I have learned is to take a step beyond that and not being nosy, but understanding that my staff, they're all women. How are you managing, with your parents, with your spouse? If you have children, unfortunately, the nightmare situation of school openings is just around the corner. If you have a special needs child, there are so many pressures and demands outside of work that before, you would have to move cautiously because there was that line, but now you have the opportunity to cross it and just let that person lean on you, and you have to understand to give them enough flexibility in order to do the work. With external, very quickly with my clients, and again, the Borland Group focuses on minority-owned and women-led companies. The diversity is part of what they do. It's what they represent. It's who they are. But we had to make sure that we weren't virtue signaling during the pandemic. Like, look at us, we're doing so great. Or creating programs that dovetailed, that added substance, but didn't seem like we were taking advantage of the situation. So again, it's like all these different hats that we have to wear, that there were no certificate programs in, you didn't major it in college, and a lot of times you just have to follow your gut and lean on your expertise and move forward with the best foot forward possible. But it's a hodgepodge of things, and I think that all of us in the industry should feel free to reach out to each other and to talk and to share and exchange ideas, because I feel that when one of us is stronger, all of us become stronger. And now is not the time to hold back thoughts and strategies that can help somebody else, because we're all in this together.
What a great way to wrap up the hour. Thank you so much, Jennifer, Jill, Moira. Tina, back over to you.
Thanks. So thanks, Jennifer, Moira, Jill, and Steve for today. We really appreciate it. So this marks the end of our webinar. Thank you all for attending. Nikki will send out the playback link in the next day or two. She's really fast about that. You can download the full ebook at our website, www.instituteforpr.org, under Signature Studies. And next week, IPR is launching their 2020 IPR Disinformation Society Report. So check it out then. Thank you all and have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you, Tina.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Tina. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.